there. Welcome to another bonus episode. I wanted to try something a little bit different. I am going to be doing a full podcast with the author and editor of this book, but I wanted to tell you why I think Season of Love by Helena Greer might be something you would really, really like. Now, I can do like a written book review, but I thought you might like a quick, just you and me audio review of why I think you'll like this book. Now, here is the cover copy. Thanks to her thriving art career, Miriam Bloom has finally gotten her decoupaged glitter ducks in a row until devastating news forces her to a very unwanted family reunion. Her beloved great-aunt Cass has passed and left Miriam part owner of Kerrigan's, her ironically Jewish-run Christmas tree farm. And if you know me, you know those 5 words made me go, "Arr?" But Miriam's plans to sit Shiva, avoid her parents, and then put Kerrigan's in her rearview mirror are spoiled when she learns the business is at risk of going under. To have any chance at turning things around, she'll need to work with the farm's grumpy manager, as long as the attraction sparking between them doesn't set all their trees on fire first. Noel Northwood wants Miriam Bloom gone, even if her ingenious ideas and sensitive soul keep showing Noel there's more to Cass's niece than meets the eye. But saving Kerrigan's requires trust, love, and risking it all for the chance to make their wildest dreams come true. So this is an interfaith lesbian holiday romance with a Jewish-run Christmas tree farm. But wait, there's more. Now, before I get going, I do want to give you some of the trigger warnings, which are in the start of the book, very, very clear. But inside there is past emotional and financial abuse, death of a family member, obviously, grief, parental estrangement, and 12-step recovery from alcoholism. As you can probably guess, there are some very grown-up problems in this book. Now, my favorite highlights. I highlighted so much of this book. It's like half highlighted. First, I want to inform you of one of my 2 favorite Yiddish words. One of my favorite Yiddish words is ongepatchket. Now, ongepatchket means completely over-decorated to the point of tacky. So this is how Kerrigan's is described in the book. Kerrigan's Christmas Land was the Velvet Elvis version of a Thomas Kincaid painting. So you can kind of guess what we're dealing with here, right? So that is another way to describe ongepatchket. So Miriam and Noel are living in this ongepatchket Christmas tree farm. And Miriam and Noel do not start off well because they both have a lot of baggage and grief. And Noel makes some very quick judgments with reason. Like she has reason to make these judgments about Miriam that affect their interactions. And it's also a problem because they have massive pants feelings for one another. So part of this is grown-ups realizing, oh, I was wrong, which, I mean, it doesn't sound very exciting, but I love internal conflict so much. Then there's this. Here is Miriam describing Noel. Oh, I love this part. Miriam didn't realize Noel had been deliberately avoiding her, and she didn't understand how Noel could already dislike her so much. Their only conversation was when Miriam had walked into the kitchen and been knocked back on her heels by the sight of a blistering hot fat butch in suspenders, all broad shoulders and hips, a wide revelation. So yeah. Maybe you've already hit pause to go find this book. Later on, Miriam says that Noel dresses like, quote, the December cover girl for Dapper Butch's Monthly. And seriously, all their conversations are so cute. Even when they're miscommunicating, they are so funny. But my favorite thing about this book and why I recommend it to you is that in addition to the dialogue and the wonderfully intricate internal conflict and all of these adults being adult about their messy and complicated feelings, is the way in which Miriam and her family, all of whom are Jewish, run a Christmas land while also preserving Jewish ways of living. They sit Shiva and they are mourning and they make challah and they keep Shabbat and they celebrate Hanukkah. Their Jewishness sort of threads through all of the ongepatchket of Christmas with this quiet determination that really resonated with me. The whole book really captures the feeling of being inescapably surrounded by Christmas when you're Jewish. So if you like Hallmark holiday movies, but you like the sweetness to be tempered by real life problems and characters who do put on their grown-up pants, you'll really like this. This is easily one of the best books I've read this year, and I'm really lucky because it's November and I'm running out of time to have my best books of the year. Honestly, this was such a fun book to read, and I inhaled it in one day. I know you are probably tired of hearing me say that, but I have to tell you, I absolutely inhaled this book. I will have links in the podcast entry for this episode where you can find this book. I think if you like holiday romances, if you like sapphic romances, if you like really character-driven romances with lots of good dialogue and thoughtful characters trying to be good people, you will like this. And there is a hefty dose of sequel bait. So much sequel bait. I also thought it might be a good idea for me to share with you some of my favorite books that I read this year, some of which are books from 2022 and some are books from 2021. So are you ready? First of all, That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming is so much fun. The heroine loves cheese, is protective of her boundaries, and if you like all of what I call the sort of medieval soft floppy shoe fantasy, but you wish that there were not just nothing but white people and white worldviews in them, you will like this. It is so much fun, and it's like 193 pages, so it's a quick read, and it's a little erotic, and there's a demon. I also really liked Crowbones, which was a 2022 book by Anne Bishop. They are very creepy. This is probably about as scary as I can get. And I have read Lake Silence, and I tried to read the second one, and I couldn't do it because there was too much past death and trauma, and I couldn't do it. But I skipped number 2 because I don't have that completionist problem. Sorry. And I read Crowbones. And this is probably my favorite part of the Others universe, Lake Silence and Crowbones. They're creepy, but there's also a person who is running an inn. She's caretaking, and that's always my catnip, right? Always my catnip. I also loved Killers of a Certain Age by Deanna Raybourn. You might have seen my review, and you probably listened, I hope, to the interview I did with Deanna. She's always a terrific interview, but this particular book was so much fun. This is one of those books that I also absolutely gulped in one day. When I was on vacation this summer, I read, finally, Wishful Drinking by Carrie Fisher. If you miss Carrie Fisher and you miss like her Twitter feed and seeing her be a completely outrageous human being, this is a nice visit. And it's also really thoughtful and funny. And again, I gulped that in one day, but it was only 178 pages. I think I read it in one afternoon on the beach. I know you've heard me mention Hither Page by Cat Sebastian. I was all about cozy crime solving this year. I think it was just, there's so much disorder and chaos. Reading about someone solving crime and restoring order in the community immediately around them. I think that's the common theme for a lot of books that I really enjoyed this year. I also loved The Monsters We Defy by Leslye Penelope, which is a magical heist set in 1920s DC. In some of the Black neighborhoods of that time. It is so good. And you want to hear a really funny story? I'll tell you a funny story. So in the morning, sometimes I go for a walk, and one of my neighbors has the most incredible little free library. It's like 3 cabinets. One of the cabinets is made up like a TARDIS. It's so cool. But anyway, sometimes I see her walking her dog, whose name is Sherlock, at the same time that I'm walking. So after a while, we start talking about books because obviously I'm going to look in the little free library while I'm walking. Like, you can't walk by a little free library and not look inside, right? Right. So we get to talking, and I tell her about this book. I see her the next week, and she goes, "Oh, I read that book. It was so good." And it turns out she works in a historical society in DC and knows the author of one of the books that was used and cited in the author's note as a research source by Leslye Penelope. So I introduced this book to this person. She immediately emailed this other guy and was like, "Have you read this? You're cited in this book." And she wants to do a whole event about this book, and I hope it happens. So that made me so happy. It's amazing what happens when you talk about books with people, right? I've been listening to the audiobooks of I guess it's the Mrs. Gordon mysteries. Anyway, they're by A.M. Stewart. The first one is Singapore Sapphire. They are set in Singapore in 1910. Harriet Gordon. Oh, I was right. It is the Harriet Gordon mysteries. Excuse me. Harriet Gordon is the heroine. She is living with her brother in Singapore. She has been recently widowed and has a very secret past. And I'll spoil this part for you. She was a suffragette who was arrested and put in prison back in London and is trying to start her life over now that she's no longer in London, but she carries with her the trauma of that experience. The second book is Revenge in Rubies, and it's narrated by a different person. It's so weird when that happens. Like, I'm not going to get mad about it, but it's always weird. I'm like, oh, that's not what their voice sounds like. The third one, which I haven't listened to yet, I'm still in the middle of the second one, is Evil in Emerald, and it is narrated by a third person. What is going on here? It is hot. It is humid. There is a lot of colonialism. There's racism. There's multiple cultures living right up next to each other. There's all of this weird political and social stuff going on, which is absolutely my jam. And the thing about Harriet is that she works with the police. The police inspector is named Curran. That's his last name. He's Robert Curran. He's not Curran, a shifter lion that you might know of from another book, different Curran. So Robert Curran is the inspector for the police department, but Harriet Gordon lives with her brother, who is the headmaster of a boarding school. And so she has a entrance into society and conversations that he does not. And they make a terrific pair. There is some sort of romantic tension there, but Curran has a partner. So I haven't seen how that's going to work out yet. I usually listen to audiobooks while I'm sewing and I'm working on a quilt pattern that has a ton of tiny, tiny, tiny pieces, like 1.5 inch squares that then I sew and become 1 inch patchwork, like, oh, little tiny, tiny squares. So it's a lot of sewing and sewing and sewing. And I love listening to audiobooks when I'm doing that. This is a terrific audiobook for cooking or walking or whatever. It keeps me company marvelously. And if you are curious what is on my to be read, on my to be read includes The Christmas Murder Game by Alexandra Benedict. That came out in early October. It is a locked house mystery with a estranged family and obviously Christmas and murder. That'd be like 2 Christmas books for me. That's a lot of Christmas books for me. And The Vibrant Years by Sonali Dev comes out on December 1st. That is the first book in Mindy's book studio. And while I do sometimes approach Sonali Dev books with a bit of trepidation because she's going to extract my heart slowly through my ribs, I also know that this book is going to be very funny because she was telling me about it. So that is a book I think you should read, some of my top titles for 2022. And one last thing, if you would like to be part of my end of the year sort of slumber party clip show where lots of people tell me their book of the year and their win for 2022. Let's celebrate the things that went right. I would love to have you be part of that as part of the Patreon community. You can email me at sarah@smartbitchestrashybooks.com. You can reply to the post inside Patreon where I talk about it. But I would love to have you in our end of the year episodes as we talk about lots and lots and lots of books. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you for being part of the Patreon. I hope you enjoyed this very casual bonus episode. Bye-bye.